Welcome to the Let's Talk Growth podcast, where we focus on the topics that can help companies unlock their growth potential. Now here's your host, Bill Hupp.
Welcome back to another episode of the Let's Talk Growth podcast. I'm Bill Hupp, joined by my co-host, founder and president of MarketWise Advising, Mike Haldane. Mike, it's been a minute. How have you been?
I have been very busy, but well, Bill. Thanks for asking.
Good. Glad to hear it. Today, we're joined by another special guest, Kristen Rose, an expert on product marketing and the founder of True Marketing. Kristen, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Bill. Thanks for having me. And hey, Mike.
In the interest of transparency, Kristen and I used to work together at Global Traffic Technologies. So thought her expertise is second to none when it comes to product marketing. So wanted to have her on to share that expertise. And so Kristen, first off, tell us about True Marketing. Why did you decide to start that company and what makes your approach unique?
Yeah, so I spent years growing marketing teams, building marketing strategies, scaling programs, and really delivering work that I've been proud of and that fortunately, I've heard others say that they really liked, right? I've been a marketer for almost 20 years. And one of the common things that I've seen is companies struggling to tell their story in a way that actually connects with their end users and the various personas that they sell to, right? So when I see that, or I come into businesses and I see marketing teams that are maybe stuck in a cycle of just fulfilling ad hoc requests from all people across the organization, I've really started to identify a need. And that need is to help businesses set a marketing strategy and then help them build a plan to execute that. So starting my own marketing firm was something that I always dreamed of. And I know you plan to ask me about that. But what kind of sets True Marketing apart is our fractional basis, where we come in and we help companies set strategies, but we also come in and sell ourselves as an extension of their existing team. So we get in the trenches with them, we get to know them inside and out, what their business goals are, set that strategy, and then also help them with the execution of the strategy.
And what led you to think that now was the right time? Were you just looking at the landscape of industry and just seeing that more and more companies that you came across didn't have a proper marketing strategy in place?
Well, I have always had an entrepreneurial spirit, first off. So this isn't the first business that I've started. I actually started a catering business many years ago, a small catering business. I had a property management company, but marketing has always been my home base. It's what I've specialized in. I have a degree in marketing and brand management. So it's where I've really built my career. Starting True Marketing was a leap, but I didn't have to jump alone. I have a co-founder who's also a specialist in ITS, mobility, and public safety. And we balance each other out. We've worked together for many years across many different companies. And what I excel in is leadership, vision, and client relationships, whereas she's kind of a machine when it comes to details and execution. So we've created a good team, and we decided after kind of a perfect storm of events, Bill, you were a part of this with some of your time at GTT, but we went through 4 either acquisitions, mergers, or divestments over the course of just 3 years. And as an individual, when you go through that much change, you feel like things are kind of outside of your control, right? I can do the best marketing possible. I can help my teams put pricing strategies in place that drive revenues. But at the end of the day, I don't have any control over what happens to the company next, right? So that being said, I don't know if I'm a control freak or what. I wanted to kind of control my own destiny. And luckily, my partner Summer did too. And we said, hey, let's take this leap. Let's take the services that we've honed in on over the last 7 years of working together, and let's start our own thing. So that's kind of what brought us True Marketing.
In my experience working with you and whatnot, I think most people misunderstand or don't know the difference necessarily between marketing and product marketing. I think they just think of product marketing as marketing. So to what extent is product marketing misunderstood, and how would you distinguish it from regular marketing, for lack of a better term?
Marketing has many different disciplines, right? Product marketing is just one in the vast world of marketing, right? Mike, I'm sure you know that because you're a marketer as well. And you can do anything from content creation all the way up to strategy setting. So it's a very, very vast area.
That is correct.
Right. Product marketing, the best way that I know how to describe it is if you think about a Venn diagram with three circles on it, one being product, one being marketing, and one being sales. Product marketing is actually where all three of those intersect. So I spent a lot of my career, because it is so misunderstood, when I started product marketing teams for like Cubic, which was a global organization, and I helped scale their teams. Most of my job was explaining to people what product marketing actually is. I had a whole PowerPoint presentation on it. Bill, I probably presented that to you at one point in time as well, because it was a new role to GTT when we worked together. But this role has been around in the tech space for a lot longer than probably what us who have worked in either mobility or ITS would relate to, because some of the companies in that space are a little bit more legacy. But in tech, it's been around for quite a while. It's very well defined, and it's a highly specialized area of marketing that can also have many disciplines within it.
I love the idea of that three-piece Venn diagram, Kristen. I think it's really easy to visualize and smart. To what extent do you think many business issues are caused by the fact that sales and marketing and product can be so siloed?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think I've come into a lot of businesses personally where there's very little to no communication between those organizations, right? Everybody thinks they know what they're supposed to do, so they go off and do it, but they don't speak to one another. That is a really great tie-in where they product marketing can bridge the gap between those three organizations. And what that'll ultimately do is improve business overall. A lot of, like, if you follow me on LinkedIn or if you follow True Marketing, we talk about sales and marketing alignment quite a bit. Obviously, any for-profit business, their goal is going to be to drive revenue, right? The only way that you can really effectively do that is if your sales and marketing teams are speaking to one another and they understand one another and they're working in harmony. Bring product into the fold. When you're offering a solution that can be highly technical in nature, but you have to explain it to a lot of different people. Marketing is building the assets and the message. Sales is delivering it to the customer. It only makes sense that those three work together and speak the same language, right? And I think we'll talk a little bit about positioning and messaging later, but that's one of the core things that product marketing focuses on: positioning and messaging strategy.
I want to bring Mike into the conversation because you've been around the block. How often have you seen a lack of communication between departments really hamper business growth efforts?
Well, unfortunately, it's more the norm than it is the exception. And, I like what you're talking about, Kristen. There's a lot of synergy between the points that you're making and where my firm is focused on the MarketWise side. When I think about marketing, when I think about product marketing, when I think about big M marketing, it's really all about bringing products to market and generating revenue and specifically revenue growth. And so, MarketWise, very aligned with what you're talking about, is focused on, building a strategy that can be executed and actually get you to the objectives that you're trying to achieve, whether, be this year or a few years from now. And then, beyond that, it's execution. And you put a fine point on the need to execute as close to flawlessly as possible. And, Bill, to answer your question, it doesn't happen unless the entire team understands the strategy and understands their role in the strategy. And then, there's some kind of a mechanism to make sure that the strategy is actually tracking. And I've written about that in some of my white papers, because I think it's that important. But when you've got disconnects between sales and product marketing, product management, the pricing team, the promotion team, et cetera, it just doesn't work the way that it was designed to work. So the communication component of all of this is critical. The other thing that we focus on is the market research part of it. So we always talk about market-wise in terms of three big pillars. One is market research, and in a lot of cases it starts there, but market research can happen throughout the process, and then strategy, and then execution, and all the ways to do it. And so I think, again, some of the points that Kristen is making are spot on from my perspective. And so, Kristen, I wanted to maybe divert a little bit and talk about how you've used market feedback, whether it be formal market research or just, discussions with customers and that sort of thing, to influence what you do from a product marketing standpoint.
Yeah, that plays a big role in it for sure, right? Just listening and having a pulse on the market. It's important for many different factors, right? If you're building a product marketing should be involved at the very, very beginning, even during business case, right? So when you're developing a business case, that's when you really look to the market and say, is there an actual demand for what we're doing, right? What
Right.
is my total addressable market? Is there actual money to be made? Is the competitive landscape such that we can really make a difference? Like, does our product differentiate itself? So starting there, and then going into the listening to the customer, right? So you have your market at large, but then getting more narrow and going to listen to the potential customers to say, okay, if we build our product out this way, does this feature meet the needs that the customer is demanding? Can I speak directly to them about the benefits of what we're building? Will it make sense to them? So I think there's some layers to how you listen to the market, build your product, build your message, and move forward with your product marketing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And multiple purposes are there, from the standpoint of market research. And to your point about building the business case, I mean, you've got to understand the landscape, the ecosystem that you're going to want to go compete in. And then, as I alluded to, later down the road, you might want to be doing segmentation work that can lead you down the path of building personas that actually, can reach the right people with the right message at the right time, as opposed to a generic message that's meant to appeal to a customer, right? But it could be somebody in finance, or somebody in, leadership, or somebody on the marketing side. Hard to say, right? And so what a lot of companies wind up doing is putting out kind of a generic message about their value proposition, and it goes to the entire audience as that. And
Yep.
maybe there are only certain pieces of it that actually apply to certain roles. So loved what you said about personas. And, what I've done is I've used market research to inform the personas as well, so that we can
Yeah.
really target the message, not just what you're saying to whom, but also, how you reach people. Because again, different roles read, different articles. They, maybe have different sources of social media, or whatever the vehicle may be. So with all that in mind, then, as you're thinking about developing a new marketing strategy, where do you start?
So one of the places that I always start with, or it's maybe not a place, it's more of an activity, is listening, right? Bill, you've actually participated in one of my sessions about active listening. It's something that I love to talk about. It's a true mantra and something that I follow. It's something that takes a lot of practice to get good at. But listening to the people within the business, listening to the market at large, right? Listening to leadership. A lot of times, product marketers will work for companies that have an executive board of directors, right? Listening to your salespeople, listening to your product managers, listening to your marketing colleagues. That is the biggest thing to me that you have to start with when you're building a strategy. Part of our process at True Marketing is doing what we call in-depth interview process. So whenever we onboard a client, We set a series of interviews with different stakeholders throughout the company. They're personas for us, right? In our company, they're the various personas. And try to deep dive through a series of questions into what drives them. What is the decision-making process behind their role within the company? Where is the company going to be in the next 3 years and 5 years? And once you can kind of lay that groundwork and build what we call a business model canvas, then you have something to start with to start building out the broader strategy of how the individual pieces and parts of marketing can support that overall business objectives.
So when it comes to the features and the benefits that you want to highlight in particular campaigns, how do you approach that part of it? And I suspect there's going to be a component of, well, we've had all the discussions that you just mentioned, and we've done some market research, so we have perspectives of everybody involved. But at some point, decisions have to be made about what to prioritize and how to say certain things and that sort of thing. So, what's your approach there?
Yeah, I think you have to really know your customer. We talked on this a little bit, right? Through the persona development is how you get to know your customer, but also through listening to them. And then one of the things I think is seeing where the patterns exist, right? So if you hear it from one person that they're requesting a feature or a benefit that they don't identify within the product, may not get as much attention as if you hear it from 10 different people, right? That's a
Right.
really just kind of easy way to say, hey, I've
Yep.
heard this from 30 different people. We probably need to do this and move it up in the list of priorities there.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so that's pretty basic.
And I would think too that knowing which features and benefits to highlight would be partly directly connected to how well you know the landscape that you're coming into. And so you have to understand, right, with your product, how is this different and how is this unique within the landscape, and then really hammer those points in any if you're going to hope to stand out in any kind of way.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Bill. And I think that kind of opens you up to one of the other disciplines within product marketing, which can be competitive intel, right? Um, when we worked together, we had a platform that we used called Crayon that helped us build out battle cards and arm our salespeople in the market to know what our differentiators were amongst all of our individual competitors, right? Where can you come in and say, hey, they have this feature, but we have this one that's a little bit better because it hits this need for you, right? Um, and I think a lot of that too can go back into the messaging of it and how you message things um, through benefits-based messaging is what I call it, right? A lot of companies will do, for lack of a better term, just verbal diarrhea about themselves, right? Look at us and all the shiny things we can do. And that's not what's going to resonate with your end users. So it's all in kind of the message that you have to.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And so, those battle cards that you're mentioning, I've done those in the past as well, and those can be really helpful to a sales team because in a lot of cases it's kind of point by point, right? And maybe it's even more representative of, certainly there's a big sort of positioning statement, but it might even be more specific to, here are the types of questions that you're going to get. How do we compare to the competition, and how do you answer this question? I think those are things that a lot of companies never get down to the detail of doing as an organization. They sort of throw it back to the sales team and let each of them individually figure things out or talk amongst themselves to, ultimately kind of get their pitch together. But, I think taking that extra step from a product marketing standpoint is really, it's a really valuable one. One of the things that I'm thinking about as we're talking about this is kind of the overall positioning of one brand versus another. So if we think about the big brands, they all have sort of their position in the market, right? How do you think about that in terms of how you position your offering or set of offerings to a competitive offering or what have you? If somebody is seeing the category for the first time and they're looking at three different brands, how do you sort of position yours against the others?
Yeah, I think it's important to really know your product inside and out, first of all, right? That's the only way that you'll truly identify what your differentiators are. You have to know yours inside and out, first and foremost. You have to know your competitors as well. Otherwise, you won't know what is truly different in order to build out the position or the message. One of the things that I have to speak about a lot too in product marketing is the difference between positioning and messaging. They're not the same thing. So when I think of positioning, I think of it as more of like an internal, how you define your product, who it's for, why it matters. And the messaging is then external, how you take that to market. So you mentioned a big brand. One of the ones that I always think of and that we commonly use in marketing for use case scenarios is Apple.
Yep.
Hello, everybody knows Apple. Um, like a positioning statement for them might be Apple builds premium, beautifully designed, easy to use technology products for people who value creativity and simplicity, right? But their messaging is a little different when they actually take a product to market, right? Their messaging is think different. And it's as simple as that, right?
Right.
But that's the beauty of it, is it gets people's wheels turning and it still aligns with that position, right? You're telling people to think different because Apple is different. They create products differently. They create value and simplicity, and they're focused on innovation. So if they're selling to people who have that same mindset, you're telling them to think different, right? They're not
Yeah.
thinking to buy their competitive product.
Yeah, Apple's a great example of exactly where I was going with this. And to use your example and take it a step further, then when somebody at an Apple store is in a sales process with a prospective customer, then they can, they start there, right? That's what the customer walks in expecting. And then they can start, looking at the different features and benefits and prices and everything else of the various, products that they may be interested in.
Yeah.
So it all fits together, right?
Yeah.
There's the brand image and the positioning, and then the specifics around the product lineup and features and
And then the
benefits and all
user
of that.
experience, right? That's one of the reasons why Apple is a winner and has been for many years, is what the experience is like when they step inside on the show floor,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Great point. Um, so what about pain points then? So, when I think of personas, when I build personas, I tend to think about not just the profile of, a particular customer segment, but, what is it that particular person in that kind of role
Yep.
is, what keeps them up at night, right? That's an old,
Yep.
that's going to date me, but that, what are the things that they are concerned with, their pain points that we want to try to address?
No, that's exactly right. I don't think that dates you. I still use that one. When I when I build out,
Good to know.
we have what we call like a values matrices, and you probably do the same thing, right? Where you have your persona in one aisle, you have like what is their pain point, what is their objective, and then how does your product overcome it? And then you have like a column for then the benefits-based message that you can align with all of that. I think that's really important. Like, I mean, we don't build products or solutions that don't go back to, at some level, someone's pain point. Otherwise, you wouldn't ever sell them. No one would ever buy them.
Right.
We all have a little bit of selfishness in us, maybe some more than others. I don't know. But I'm not going to buy a product if it doesn't speak to me, right? If I can't relate to how this is going to make my life better, improve my life in some way, there's no way that I'm going to invest in it. And that's like really the secret of marketing, right? Is telling that story to somebody in a way that they could really understand and relate to.
Yeah. So you're hitting on the last part that I was going to ask you about with regard to personas. So, there's the pain points. You can, sort of describe them as a set of needs, but the needs go beyond functional, right? So, there are functional needs, there are emotional needs, and you're kind of hitting on that point now. And then even social needs, right? And a product like Apple, there's a certain, um, I don't know, status that comes along with having Apple products. There's a certain persona associated with that brand. You said it earlier about, who it is that they're appealing to, and people want to align or they don't want to align with that brand and that image. How have you used emotional and social and functional needs as you've thought about messaging and the personas in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I think about, it's top of mind, probably because they're a client that I work with very closely, is Ultimate. They work in what's called automated enforcement technology. We have various personas that we market and sell to. A lot of times it's chief of police, but you have school superintendents, you have city leaders such as mayors that are involved in the conversation, right? And each one of them has something unique that they're looking for. You also have like the user, the end user of the software platform. They're looking for something totally different, right? They just want to be able to go in, get it done quickly, and then move on with the rest of their job, right? Whereas a mayor's need and use is probably a little bit at a more societal and social level, right? They're really going to be influenced politically, right? Are people going to vote for me if I implement this? So that's really
Right.
important. But they also do want to drive safety for their community. So there's lots of layers when you start looking at that different type of positioning and messaging. And it goes back to the personas, right, that we're talking to. You have to really know your customers at the heart of it, right? But then you have to, for something as complex as automated enforcement, which it is, because then you have the general public who view it as sometimes a nuisance. You have to make sure the message is focused on something for society at large. How does this benefit me? I know it doesn't benefit me if I run a red light and I get a ticket in the mail and okay, guilty, okay? But truly, it improves safety on roadways and it saves lives. So that's the message, right? And it's sometimes if you're launching a new product or bringing a new product to market, it's a lot harder to get to that message. You got to do the study, you got to do the diligence, you got to listen, you got to interview, you got to talk to people, and you got to get to the heart of it.
Yeah, another great example. I think, with somebody who's in a political office, especially, it goes way beyond just the functional needs of the solution. It's, yeah, on the emotional or the social, needs side of things, how will I look to my constituents,
Yeah.
and will this help me get reelected or not? Which does sound very self-serving, but at the same time, we all know these are considerations that are taken into account.
Yeah. Just to kind of go a little bit more into that, one of the things that the marketing team at Ultima decided to do was really focus on supporting clients before the launch of a program in their communications efforts, right? Making sure you're going to market early and often with the same narrative. I think that's one of the things we haven't really touched on is just communicating across channels and often to the point of where you're tired of hearing yourself say it and you're tired of hearing others say it because there's still somebody who hasn't heard it, right? And that's what's going to like really hit people over the head with it. So totally in line with you on it.
Yeah, that I'm glad you brought that up, Kristen, because that is something that I have seen on a very regular basis where the message is not consistent. And you don't have to use the same exact words every time you say it, but the message needs to be the same. And this is where, kind of getting back to the battle cards comment that you made earlier, if you let the salespeople determine the message, right, and everybody's got a little bit of a different twist on it, that doesn't tend to end very well because really what happens is the customer is confused. And especially when, we think about our experiences at Global Traffic Technologies, where you have, one city talks to the city next to them, and if they both heard a different set of messages and they don't necessarily align, it's just going to cause a level of confusion that nobody ever anticipated. But if you have two separate salespeople calling on two separate customers that happen to be talking with each other, that's not a good situation. And then if they see, something that comes from marketing that's, a third way to look at things, right? I mean, it could be an email campaign or something they saw on the website or an advertisement or what have you, then, it's just mass confusion, and that's not good for anyone. I want to talk a little bit about trust and how you bring that into the conversation. I had a conversation with a colleague just an hour ago, and we were talking about brand and we were talking about trust. And the point that I made was trust is the foundation for everything. And without that, nothing else you say is going to matter because, once that's gone, it's gone and it's really hard to earn it back. What's your view on that? And how have you used that in the past?
I think you're exactly right. It should be one of everyone's core values, right? Because if you don't trust your partners, you don't trust your colleagues, it's going to breed a toxic environment or it's going to lead to the end of your business, truly. One of the ways that I really focus on building trust is just by being authentic, right? Admitting when you don't know something. I know I certainly don't know everything. I do try to be an expert in my field, but I'm not always going to know everything. So being transparent and open when you don't, saying, but I'll figure it out, right? And I try to do that for my clients and for colleagues when I work for them as well. And then I think one of the ways that you can build trust too is just by being kind of a knowledge powerhouse in wherever your area of specialization is. So I never stop learning. I read a lot. I try to always grow within the marketing discipline. But for us, we're really highly specialized in ITS and mobility and public safety. So I'm always reading like what's up to date in the market so that I can speak to it truly. Also acting with integrity, right? Doing the right thing when you need to. So a good way that I found that we can do that as a business owner is not every project is going to be right for true marketing, right? And as much as I'd like to be able to help everyone or think that I can do all the marketing services in the world, being able to say, hey, that's not a fit for me, but to give it to another one of my colleagues and, maybe Mike, that's you sometime down the road, right? We're both marketers. Yep. We work in the same space. So I think those three things, just, again, being authentic, continuing to learn, and then acting with integrity are ways to build trust.
I totally agree with all of that. And I think that extends to the customer relationship as well. And one of the things that I think about in terms of how do you market trust, right? I mean, there's the part of it where you say one thing and then you do that same thing, right? That builds trust over time. The other thing that I've focused on in my current role, but other roles as well, is kind of the whole concept of thought leadership, right? So, doing speaking engagements, having an active PR campaign that, demonstrates thought leadership, writing white papers. Have you experienced any of that? And if so, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, being a conversation leader is really important. It's actually one of the reasons that I'm here today. Thanks for having me, you guys.
Yeah, right.
Right. To talk about product marketing. It's still not well known in these areas that we specialize in, mobility, ITS, and public safety. People are like, "Oh, what is that?" So I think it's very, very important for our strategies for individual businesses. But then as we go in to help other businesses build their strategies, I've often worked alongside CEOs or other business executives, if I can get that word out, to talk to them about positioning themselves as thought leaders, right? Because that's just going to better position the business in the broader landscape of its competition. So very, very important aspect of building out any marketing strategy.
Kristen, I'm curious to know, given the space that your company operates in, the public safety ITS space, how much are you seeing AI integrated into new products and kind of coming on the horizon if it's not already fully here? And then my second part is, how can AI assist product marketing? How can it be used to make your product marketing even stronger?
Yeah. So AI is prevalent across everything we're doing. And guys, I think we're barely even seeing the tip of what it's going to be like in 10 years. Almost every company that I work with are using AI or building AI into their platforms and products, whether it's through camera-based technology, platform-based technology, their ability to integrate data with other systems. They are using some form of AI. I feel like if they're not, you're already 20 years behind and you might as well hang it up, right? So that's for kind of like my clients in that industry at large. Everybody's using it. For my marketing, we use it daily. We're always trying to figure out ways that we can make our time go longer. We're trying to think smarter, not harder all the time. We work hard, but we want to think smart about it. We use AI for scheduling. We use AI for note taking and communications with our clients. And then we use AI to generate ideas a lot of times, right? So if I'm just struggling to find ideas, I really try to use AI. One area where I'm very careful, because I work with a lot of like junior marketers, and I think that's really important as we grow in senior leadership in our marketing paths, to make sure that we're educating those that are younger than us and influencing them and helping them grow to their next stage. One of the things I always encourage them is don't lean on AI too much for your written and verbal content. It's easy because it'll put something out for you in seconds and you don't have to think about it. But those of us that use AI, I can see it in a second in a LinkedIn post. You know, it feels inauthentic. So that's where we go back to that trust thing. If I find it harder to trust if you're leaning too much on AI, because you're not being human anymore. So I think we do have to be a little careful.
Yeah, and I mean, I use AI every single day, and I think it's incredibly valuable, and I completely agree that we are, just at the tip of the iceberg. What what I would say with AI, at least for me personally, is that it's really good with writing and editing and research and that sort of thing, secondary research, but it only gets you about 80% of the way there. And
Right.
so, you cannot check your critical thought at the door. You've got to go in then and say, okay, I'm going to edit this and make sure that it makes sense, number one, but also that it's my authentic voice, number two. So what I use it a lot for is to write what I want to get out there, and then I'll import it and say, how could I make this better?
Yep.
And then I take that version and I say, okay, well, I would say it this way, or I wouldn't say it this way. I like what it did there, but I don't like what it did here. And I found that to be pretty productive. So it's still an interactive process, but it's with the aid of a tool that's incredibly valuable. So that's the way I approach it. And I think it only gets better over time, right? So, it's really hard to predict what this will look like in 5 years, let alone 10, 15, or 20 years. But, it is incredibly valuable, especially for secondary research and for, finding tips for how to write better and that sort of thing.
I I get scared almost on a weekly basis by how smart my instance of ChatGPT is getting. It's kind of crazy. I did ask it to do something, and I thought it was going to assist me with it. We have a client now that we're building a website for, and I thought it was going to actually build a wireframe for me and then export it into a Figma format, because it told me it was. It did not work. But I was like, if this happens, I mean, this is crazy. It's one of those things, like, this is almost scary, because this could take 3 days and you're going to do it in 2 hours, you're telling me. So yeah, but it wasn't quite there yet with that. So.
Yeah, no, totally agree.
Well, Kristen, we really appreciate you joining us today. This has been such a delightful conversation. Where can people learn more about True Marketing and potentially connect with you as well?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank you, Mike and Bill, for inviting me to be a part of this. It's great thought leadership. So I look forward to letting others listen to it and getting the conversation started. If you want to learn more about True Marketing, you can follow me on LinkedIn at Kristen Rose, or you can visit us at trumktg.com, or follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike, once again for helping facilitate this conversation.
Yep. Thanks to you both.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Let's Talk Growth. If you enjoyed it, feel free to rate and review the podcast. You can get new episodes and listen to old ones by visiting marketwiseadvising.com/podcasts. Let's Talk Growth is owned, produced, and published by MarketWise Advising, LLC.